Business really started when I was 9 or 10 years old. My father lost his job, and my parents bought a little fisheries, small grocery store in Yeovil. And because it was tough, 6 in the morning till 6 at night, they'd come home from work. My brother and I would have to go and help them unpack groceries, mark stuff, weigh sugar, weigh rice. In those days, it didn't come pre-packaged. So that's when I learned early on about margins, because you couldn't use a big paper bag for a half a pound. Everything was measured in half cents. So that's where we sort of started. And then once I'd matriculated and done my army training, I was working as a rep, and my dad got sick. He had a couple of heart attacks, so I was almost forced to go into the business full time. My brother was already there, and I hated every minute of it. I hated that business with a passion. So our roles kind of evolved. He was sort of more the front man dealing with the customers, and I tended to deal with the reps and placing the orders, working out whether we should buy 10 cases of tea for a 10% discount, how long it would take us to sell it, does it pay us? And that's where I started sort of learning the ropes, or if you like, the ins and out of business. But even as a kid, every night my parents would come home, they'd bring all the cash, and then after dinner they would sit and count it, and we'd help them count it and do the cash book. My dad would do the cash book. So I knew what was a good day, a bad day. Did they make money? They lose money? And quite interesting, if you look at entrepreneurs worldwide, if you look at someone like Sir Philip Green, I don't know how long he'll still be a sir, but Philip Green. So his parents had a garage, and he worked. Richard Branson, they all seem to come, not all, but a lot of entrepreneurs come from a background where their parents were in a business and they had helped or worked in that business and somehow given them some kind of basic understanding of business, and they wanted more. So my dad was in hospital with another heart attack. We decided we better sell the business. My brother and I had started a delicatessen in Sandton City. So we gave the business to business brokers to sell. We didn't want our staff to know about it. I met them off site. And eventually we got an offer. We sold it, very small deposit, a whole lot of bills. I stayed on to integrate and help the guy. And I realized within a few days that there was something wrong, because we'd get deliveries of stuff we never sold. Suitcases, 100 suitcases, and in 2 days they were gone. We never sold a suitcase. So I realized they were going out the back door, and it was a scam. Went to our lawyers, nothing we can do until the guy breached his promissory notes, which he did after 2 or 3 months, and did a duck to Greece, having sold the stock out the back door. And then to add insult to injury, one of the brokers that we had given a mandate to sell claimed that I'd given him a sole mandate, because I didn't cross out I do not. So we ended up having to pay commission on the sale that really never happened twice. It was a very bitter pill. And when my dad was out of hospital, we were left not with rewards from 25 years of running a business, but with a whole lot of debts. So my dad had to take a job as a storeman for a chain. My mother was working in a hamburger place, and my brother and I were working and helping to pay off the debt. So it was something that left an indelible mark on me, and I swore that would never happen to me again. So what you learn from something like that is, it was a bitter pill, but you learn. And what I've learned throughout my career is you can't stop making mistakes. You have to learn from your mistakes. And in fact, in my first job after the little grocery shop, I went to work for a construction property firm. And my boss there once said to me, and he gave us a lot of flexibility, so he once said to me, it's more important to make the decision right than make the right decision. Once you've made the decision, it might be right or wrong, or not what you think, but you can do something about it, fix it. And that's been one of my mantras. So I think you can learn from your mistakes. I think you have to give people the authority and the trust to do their own thing. And if they make mistakes, that's fine. It's part and parcel of the cost of doing business, providing they don't make the same mistake twice. So you have to learn. I call it paying school fees. And I think that's a very important part of business and of leadership. So how I got into property, it was twofold. First of all, when we had this little supermarket grocery shop, the property was being redeveloped, and my parents had negotiated that they could have a small percentage interest in the development. And as it was being built, we had to move our shop from place to place temporarily. And because I hated what I was doing, I spent more time watching the construction guys and I loved it. I was just fascinated at the way they built it. And when we saw that we had lost our money and the guy we sold to had done a duck, I was looking for a job. Looking in the Sunday Times at the time, I was offered a lot of jobs in the food business to go and work as a manager of a food store. And I hated the business. I didn't want to do that. And I saw a job for a shopping centre manager. I had no idea what a shopping centre manager did, but it appealed to me on the basis of I wouldn't have a boss. I wouldn't have somebody saying, take your lunch break today from 12 to 1 or 1 to 2, or now's your tea break, because I was used to being my own boss and doing my own thing. So I applied for this job, wrote a letter, sent it off, and to my surprise, I got a call to say, come for an interview. The interview, I still remember, was on a Tuesday, so on the Sunday, I took a drive out to Kempton Park. I didn't even know where that was, and walked around the shopping centre, which was one of South Africa's first shopping centres, and then went for my interview. So when I had the interview, the interviewee said to me, so if you got this job, what would you do? And I started telling him, well, I think the steakhouse's windows are in the wrong place. And so he said, have you actually been there? I said, yes. He said, do you live there? I said, no, I went to have a look at it. And apparently I was the only one of about 10 applicants who had actually gone to look at the shopping centre, so I got the job. In addition to that, once I was appointed into the position, as I say, I knew nothing about property. So what I did do was walk around the shopping centre, talk to the tenants, see what their gripes were, and then started applying my grocery skills in terms of charging for water, which I didn't know was illegal, but I did anyway, and that kind of thing. So I think one of the first lessons I learned was, in anything you do, you have to know your product. You have to walk it. I call it MBWA, management by walking around. So, for example, we have at Redefine a number of what we call commuter centres. So these are close to railway stations, taxi ranks, and trying to understand the mind of the consumer. So I went to one of them in Germiston, 7 o'clock in the morning, to see what the foot pattern was. What I discovered was not that our biggest draw was Pick n Pay or ShopRite or one of those. It was in actual fact the toilets. Okay, because these people are in the taxi from 4:30 or 5 a.m. in the morning, maybe for an hour and a half or 2 hours. They get to the taxi rank, they want to go to the toilet. Now, up until then, the toilets were locked. Maybe they charged for using the toilets. They weren't great, in great condition. So when I saw that was the reason, one of the primary reasons to come into our centre, we spent a lot of time, effort and money in making the toilets bigger, more attractive, no charge. And lo and behold, the centres became more popular. This you can't find, as I keep telling people who work for us, on Google Maps. Okay, so you can't sit and look at your centre. You have to kick the bricks, walk, and I don't care what your product is. You have to understand your consumer. You have to walk. We can't buy a building by looking at a picture. Somebody has to go there, see what the entrances, the exits, the traffic patterns, all the kind of things, who your neighbours, what opposition there is, what opposition is likely to come. Only when you do this and you actually walk it and understand it and get a feel for it, okay? Maybe it sounds crazy in this day and age, but almost like a gut feel. Numbers can tell you one thing, but you really have to feel that this is something that you want to acquire. So to me, management by walking around, very, very important. Google Maps, less so. After I was about less than a year at the shopping centre, my boss arrived one day and said to me, do you know what you've done? I said, no. And he said, you've added 300,000 Rand to the value of this property, which was worth then about 5 million Rand. So I didn't know what I'd done. And before he said that, he said to me, find someone to take over from you. So I thought I was fired. So what have I done? And then he explained. And I didn't know what he was talking about. He was telling me, you increased the income by X amount, capitalised at 8%, it's 300,000 Rand. I left after he told me I was now going to go to head office, and I went to the person that was the partner of my parents, and he understood property. So I went and I asked him to explain to me what he had done. So, because I thought, 10% is better than 8%. It's inverted. I didn't understand what he was talking about. It took him a while. I got it. They took me into head office to do the same for blocks of flats and all those kind of things, which I did for about another year. And then the economy was in bad times. The company I worked for was indebted to the bank, and the bank pulled the plug. So, end of the company, the bank was taking over the properties. So 3 of my co-workers and I went to see the bank and said, okay, you're taking over these properties. Who's going to manage them? We would like to start a company to manage them, and after convincing them that we can do the job, we'd keep the staff, etc., it was then left to me, once everything had been agreed, to ask the bank to lend us 10,000 rands worth of working capital, because between us we had 600 rand to register the company. And that was the start of our first venture, which was called City Plan, which was a property management business. And we ran that for about 5 or 6 years. And we were trying to grow it, so we approached one of our competitors, and rather than us buy them, they said they wanted to buy us. So we sold our business to them and started a new business, same partners, with one didn't want to come along. And we started a business called InCity, which was really conversion of flats in Hillbrow, Berea, for sectional title and property syndications. We ran that for a while, but we were always using outside funds. And one of the companies that invested with us was called Metboard. Metboard was a shareholder in Investec Bank. Those 2 companies merged, and at that point in time, my partners, one went to Durban and one went to Australia. So I was left running the business for Investec Bank. They bought out the remaining share that we had. And I suppose that was the start, if you like, of my corporate career. When I think back, my career was in reverse, because I should have worked for an institution first and then had my own business, because I learned a hell of a lot at Investec about how institutions work and those kind of things. But it was a fantastic learning experience. So when we had our first business, the property management business, I very quickly learned that I wasn't a detailed kind of guy. I was very good with people, so I was good meeting with the clients, going through their rent rolls, giving them their checks, talking to them about potential additions to their properties. What I was really no good at was admin, and that when I realized that you have to have skills, recognize, important to know what you're good at, but more important to recognize what you're not good at. So I was very fortunate in that my partner, the one who's in Australia now, was the most detailed guy ever. And in fact, in 15 years, we only had one disagreement. We'd moved to new premises in Braamfontein, new furniture, and our offices were next to each other with one secretary in between. And he walked into my office and he said to me, "Do you know, the state of your desk reflects the state of your mind?" And I said to him, "So what are you telling me? You've got an empty mind," because his desk was absolutely clear when he went home, and mine were. But I could find anything I was looking for. If somebody wanted a piece of paper, and I'm still like that to this day. So I recognize that I'm not the detail guy. I can conceive, I can do, I can negotiate, I can do a deal. Don't ask me to start reading the agreements, the legal agreements, the lease agreements, because I'm no good at it. I don't have the patience. I don't have the wherewithal. I can solve problems if somebody comes to me with agreements and we can't agree on this clause. That I can do, because I take a commercial view, not a legal view. But so I think what's very, very important for any person in a business is to know your strengths, but more importantly, identify your weaknesses and employ the best people that you can who are good at what you're not good at. So in my Investec days, so first of all, I found myself responsible for a lot more people, because what we did at Investec was we bought, funnily enough, the company that we had sold City Plan to. They wanted a bigger property group, so suddenly we were 150 or 200 people, and I found myself having to run this, which I really didn't enjoy, because I wasn't interested in people's medical aids, pensions, leave policies, and as the business grew, it became more and more bureaucratic, and then I had this aneurysm, which I survived, fortunately, And I decided this wasn't for me. I wasn't coming to work out who's parking in which parking bay, because there was a perception if you were on the higher floor, you were a fast-track individual, and spending days talking about this kind of nonsense. I decided time for me to go back on my own, which I did. And I went and I started a little company called Wainer and Associates, which really was consulting, a little bit of consulting work, and putting together private syndicates with high net worth individuals. And that's also when I realized that the people who were investing with me didn't know about the properties. They weren't interested. They were really backing me. And this is a huge sense of responsibility. So whereas previously I had somebody to say, should we renew this lease at this rent, or should we buy this or sell this, my investors weren't interested. It was my call, and I now had a huge responsibility to these people. And besides a financial responsibility, on the line was also my name and reputation. So that's when I really felt the, if you like, the burden of leadership in some sense, because it's all very well and very nice to be a leader, but it comes with a burden, a lot of responsibility. So I ran that business for a while, and it was an up and down business. You in overdraft one day, then you do a deal, and it's fine. And then came 1998, interest rates at 25%, and what had happened was my investors had put in equity, but I'd signed for the mortgage bonds, and suddenly everything was underwater, and every month from the little bit of money that I did have, I was writing checks to the banks and going bankrupt fast. So I looked around at what I could do to solve this problem, and I then looked at the listed property sector. At Investec, we had listed 2 property funds, mediocre results, but the listed property sector, in line with interest rates, had blown out. So with the help of a broker, I found a portfolio, an institution that had a portfolio of about 160 million rands of investments in various property funds. And I convinced Eric Ellerin, who I'd done one deal with, that this would be a great thing to invest in. The bank would lend us 120 million. We needed 30 million of equity. He would put it in and we'd share the profits 50-50. Because as interest rates came down, which I was sure they would have to, we would make a profit. And everything was going fine. I had to negotiate with the institution. They wanted a premium and Eric Ellerin wanted a discount. So eventually we came to terms at 152 million rand. And I remember it was a Friday, and I phoned Eric Ellerin to say we'd got a 30-day option to buy it. And he told me, "You're crazy. I'm not doing anything. The markets have tanked, and he's doing nothing." So I went to see him. You couldn't have given him 10 rand for 5. It was bloody in the streets, and he was doing nothing. So I spent the next 3 weeks going around to every institution, every person that I could think of, including Investec, saying, "I've got this deal, I think it's a great deal," and nobody was interested. Never even got to drink the coffee if I got it offered. Property was a bad word. And with a week to go, one of the founders of Investec, a guy called Errol Grolman, who had left, came to see me in my office, and I was talking to him. And I showed him this deal, and he said, "It's a no-brainer. Take it to Jeff Liebsman, ex-WNA." I didn't know Jeff Liebsman, but I did know that he'd had an interest in a bank that I'd been to. He said, "Go and see Jeff." And in my own sort of shorthand way, my feasibility was 2.5 or 3 pages. I went to see him at his offices in Killarney. He read my proposal. He said, "This is a no-brainer. We're going to do it." We had 4 days left, so him and Errol and their guys worked 4 days. We did the deal. But of course now with Eric out, it was a 50-50. And all I was going to get out of this now was a commission. Well, it was better than nothing, and it kept the wolf from the door. So we did that, and one of the conditions that they put in was I had to manage this portfolio. This was August, okay? As it happens, it was the 18th of August when we signed the deal, the lowest point ever that the listed property index got to. Sheer fluke. I would like to say I was clever. I wasn't. Sheer fluke. And by the end of January, the 32 million that they had invested had doubled, okay, because interest rates came down. So I get this call from Errol who says, "Listen, we like this business. We think it's a good business. and we want you to join us and start a property division. So I thought, well, this isn't us. So I said, no, if you want to do that, you have to buy my business, Mark Wainer and Associates, which wasn't worth much. But I got 5 or 6 million at the time for a sign-on fee, let's call it. So that's what we did. We then had this portfolio. The question was how to build it. So we had a listed portfolio. The institutions at the time, all the old mutuals and Sanlums, were overweight in property, and they wanted to dilute. But the question was, there were no buyers. So we came up with this idea, well, let's go and list a company, offer them half cash, which the bank would give us by way of a mortgage, and half shares in a new fund. And that proved very successful. So what we had for the first time was what I called a hybrid fund. We had this portfolio of listed shares, which was added to by some of the institutions because at least they were getting half cash out. And we listed in February 2000 Redefine with a market capitalization of 450 million rand and debt of about the same. So it was about a 900 million rand portfolio, and it was about half listed shares and half direct property. So that was fine, and I still remember when we listed it, we had to raise about 70 million rands worth of cash. A lot of the guys were getting shares and cash, some wanted all cash, and we were sitting with bated breath to see on the last day if we'd get it, and I think we got 72 million. So we were just over. And that was the start of Redefine. And we were able to grow because we had this listed portfolio. In some instances, we had 25% of a company, and we levered that to get control of the physical assets. So that's what happened. At the same time, we had a management company within the bank, which we then, my partner and I, bought out. So we had this management company, and we were managing not only Redefine, but we had a big stake in a fund called Hyprop, so we were managing that. We had a third of that management company, and then we started a third company called Apex High. So we had these 3 companies that were giving us an income. We were the asset managers, for want of a better word, and the funds continued to grow. So the bigger the funds grew, the bigger our fees. So we were buying and selling, probably in many instances for the wrong reason. Okay, so we were able to get this. We weren't too critical about the quality of the properties we were getting at the time. It was more about size and scale. Then in 2008-9, we decided to internalize our management company, and we tried to merge the 3 funds that we managed, which was Redefine, Apex, and Hyprop. A lot of resistance to Hyprop, which was a focused retail fund, so we weren't able to get that right, but we merged Redefine, Apex, and our company Madison, which at the time gave us total assets of about 10 billion rand, including Hyprop. Remember, we had a big party because we had 10 billion rands worth of assets. Today, some 15 years later, no, 6 years later, or 7 years later, we've got about 80 billion of assets under management, a market cap of 60 billion from 450 million in 15 years. So it's been remarkable. I think that if anybody would have asked me in 2000 when we listed, what would we like to do? I think if I would have said I'd like a market cap of 1 billion rand, which was double, I would have been more than satisfied. So I never thought we would get here, and when I look back, it's been remarkable, and it's not something which I've done. I think, when you run a business, a small business, Mark Wainer, 6 people, 7 people, of course you can take credit for a lot. When you're running a business that employs 450 or 500 people, every one of them plays a role. So the question comes back to how do you manage a business like this? What's the leadership like? What do you do? So I was the CEO of the company until 2 years ago, 18 months ago, when I stepped up to the executive chairmanship role. And I think what's important, and something that I realized a long time ago, is that any business is about people. So I say to our people, property is our commodity, but people are our business. And when I say people, it's our staff, it's our customers, it's our suppliers, it's everybody that we come into contact with. And relationships are the most important thing. So it's how you deal with people and how your staff deal with people, each and every one of them. For me, still, one of the most traumatic things that we have to do sometimes is cancel somebody's lease because they haven't been able to pay. And when you look at it, let's say it's somebody who's running a sweet shop in a shopping center. That guy's relying on that business to pay his school fees, to put food on the table, to do whatever he's got to do. But if he can't pay the rent, okay, now it's like somebody who's hiring a flat or a house. If you can't pay the rent in February, you're not going to be able to pay the February and March at the end of March. You just don't have it. And unless there's a compelling reason, a creditor or something, or a debtor hasn't paid him, he's not going to be able to pay 2 months. So at a point in time, you have to go to the guy and say, look, you're not making it. It's better for you to close. Let's come to an arrangement on the arrears and go. But nevertheless, it's still traumatic, and it's how you deal with that person. When I was at Investec, they had a guy by the name of Professor Wainer who used to come and lecture us about stuff. Never really took much note. But the one thing that he did say that always stuck with me was, don't leave victims, okay? Because a victim is somebody who one day is going to come and stab you in the back. So in your dealings with people, leave them with dignity. Even if you're going to fire somebody, try and do it in such a way that you leave them with dignity. And that's something that stuck with me. It's part of my ethos. It's part of my DNA that's how we have to deal with people. So we have the staff. I see myself, if you talk about leadership, as a conductor of an orchestra. If you think about, I'm not a great musician, I'm a bit tone deaf, but if you listen to a symphony concert, here's 70 or 80 people, each playing an instrument, a guy who's sitting and conducting, and every person is playing their instrument at the right time, at the right pitch, at the right volume, and he's conducting it. So his job is to say, this is the piece of music that we're playing today. This is how it's going to be played. This is the tempo. And that's how it works. So a business is no different. So my job is to pick the members of the orchestra as best as possible, people who can do their job or their function to the best of their ability, okay, and to do it at the right time and all together. So that's really your function. And in the same way as the conductor of an orchestra has the lead violinist and the guy who's in charge of the wind instruments or whatever, so you have your executive team, because you can't do it all by yourself, and they've got to go and make sure that they're my lead violinists and so on. So those people are key, okay, and each one of them then employ people who are responsible and report to them. So it's so important that people are your business. Without people, you don't have a business. Simple as that. And without relationships, you don't have a business. And loyalty to your suppliers. I read a book many years ago called Between the Arches. It's the story of Ray Kroc, the founder of McDonald's. And what he had done was, when he started McDonald's, he couldn't get suppliers to supply him because the opposition was saying, if you supply him, we're not going to. So he had to go to secondary suppliers, whether it was for paper bags, paper, buns, whatever it was, he had to go to secondary suppliers. And they grew. To this day, those people who supported Ray Kroc in the beginning are still supplying the paper bags and stuff, and have become multi-million-dollar businesses, okay? And he's been loyal to them. The company's been loyal to those people forever. So you started with me when we were small, and now you can do with them. So that's very, very important to me. In fact, I always tell the story, when we went offshore, our first venture, to a company which is now called Redefine International, but was then called Cyref, we had a small stake. The guy who runs is a guy called Mike Waters, who I worked with at Hyprop. And when we were about 80 million pounds market cap, we wanted to grow the business. I went to the UK and I went knocking on the doors of all the merchant banks to say, look, we're small, but we want to grow. This is what we've done in South Africa. Help us, give us some capital, help us find deals. And sort of, they gave you a cup of coffee, and the message was, sorry, you're too small for us, and when you're out of nappies, come back, kind of scenario. Well, it was what it was. Then came 2008-9, the financial crisis, and suddenly we were maybe now 100 million pounds, but Redefine was quite big here. And all these guys were flying into South Africa to come and see me. Why are you coming to see me? No, we've got a deal. I said, but we're too small for you. No, now we're the right size. Okay, so I always tease them. And it's great. So I always say, should have treated us. And some of them I still resent the way they treated us, and I won't do business with them. So it's important. People, relationships are very, very important, including your staff. Staff, you hire people. They're at different levels. Some are really very basic. Could be your tea lady or whatever it is, right up to your CEO. But those people have lives outside. They don't come to work at 9 o'clock in the morning and leave at 5 and compartmentalize their lives. If they've had a fight with their husband or boyfriend, or their kids are sick, or they've got an issue, their mother or father is dying, that comes with them. And we have to support these people and do what we can to assist them through these things, because they can come to work, but if their mind is elsewhere, they might as well not be there. So I don't, for example, worry if somebody comes to work at 10 o'clock instead of at 9 and leaves at 3. It's what they do in the hours that they're there that are important to me. And we have to grow people. I think in the South African environment today, it's so important, because in our industry, for example, there really is a lack of skill. So we employ people, we take 25 graduates a year, we run them through a course. We can't employ all of them. Maybe we employ 10 at the end of the year, 15 are trained, they can go elsewhere. Sometimes you lose people, really good people, because they enjoy working with you, everything's right, but in a corporate environment, some private guy poaches them or approaches them and offers them a salary or an equity stake. I've just had one of those, which you can't match. And then I have to encourage them to say, listen, take it, it's good for you. It's not good for me, it's not good for Redefine, but for you personally, it's the right choice. So, I think being a leader, so as I say, my job is to set the strategy together with my executives. We set a strategy, we try and improve. People say, what is our job? If you read the business books, it's to improve or maximize shareholders' returns. Yes, that's very important. It's also to make sure that the people that you're working with have a happy working environment, that you become an employer of choice, that your suppliers want to do business with you, that customers want to do business with you. I always tell my people, anybody can sell somebody space or something once. It's when that person expands and they come back to you, or they refer you to somebody else, that you've got a customer. So these relationships are highly, highly important. I also worry about our business. Okay, so when things are going well, that's easy. The good side always takes care of itself. So my function today really is, where are the problems? What's not going well? And that's what I try and deal with. I also have a credo. People say to me, what are our threats? I say ABC. A is for arrogance, B is for bureaucracy, and C is for complacency. Those are the three things that, in my view, can kill a business. Arrogance is number one. Bureaucracy, unfortunately, is something that creeps in. The bigger an organization, the more bureaucratic it becomes. But I fight it. I try and keep it to a minimum. And of course, there is complacency. And I try and run out. In fact, one of the nicest things that ever happened to me about 2 years ago, we employed a guy who had come, a black guy, okay, BEE and all the rest of it, and he had come from a large institution, and he joined us on a 6-month probation basis, and he worked with me quite closely. And as we were coming to the 6 months, I called him in. I said, so, well, what do you think and how's it going? He says, he's amazed. We're running this big business, but it feels like a family business. That was the biggest compliment I've ever been paid, because, each business is, and you can either have a very bureaucratic, hierarchical kind of thing. Our business, the way I want it run, is it's an open door. Anybody come and talk to me anytime. You've got a problem, you're not happy with what your manager's telling you, just come and talk. We try and involve our staff in what's happening as much as possible. So we're going to be announcing a big deal today or on Monday. Before it goes out on SENS and it goes out in the press, we call all our staff together countrywide, and we'll tell them what it's all about, why we've done it, what it means for the business, and what it means for them. We encourage our people to better themselves by going on training, going to university, all of these things. And in terms of coming back to MBW, every Saturday morning I'll go for breakfast with my wife to a different shopping centre and walk around and go and talk to people. Say, this is who I am, how's business, what's happening, what do you think we should be doing better? Because these are people that know. If you want to know if you're going to buy a building, you want to know what's going on in a shopping centre, go to the coffee bar. Because the guy who's running the coffee bar is going to tell you better than any consultant that you can employ as to what that centre should have. Should it have a nail bar? Should it have something else? That guy or that woman who's running the coffee bar can really tell you what's going on. So from a leadership point of view, I think, as I said earlier, it's very, very important that you have strong people to do what you can't do. And now that I've sort of elevated myself to executive chairman, I don't have to worry about the pensions and the medical aid. So I'm really customer focused and talking to our major customers and going to see them, and also doing deals. So I'm like a deal junkie. So I love doing deals. And there again, if we're going offshore, we've just done a very big deal in Poland, which was quite interesting because at the Rugby World Cup, I went for a month because we were entertaining clients, and I was working in our London office. And on the third day, a broker came in with a portfolio of properties for sale in Poland. I had no interest, but Mike Waters, our CEO, they said, let's go and have a look. So we went for 2 days to Poland, and I was blown away. Not only by the properties, but by the people who were selling it, who wanted to stay in for 25% stake. And the chemistry within 2 days that I had with these guys convinced me it was something we should try and do. When the documents came out, because there were about 15 or 16 people bidding, I put in our offer, but I told them I would only do it on the basis of exclusivity. And they liked the chemistry, so they came to South Africa, and we did a deal in terms of which we had an exclusivity provided we met certain dates. And the deal is now done. It was done effective 1st of June. We're going to list it in the next 2 or 3 weeks. And the chemistry I have with these guys is just phenomenal. The same thing in our Australian operation. When we went there, we found this fund that we wanted to invest in, and eventually sat down with the guy. We negotiated the terms. I then said to the CEO, guy Paul Waitman, let's go and drink coffee for an hour or two. He said, why? I said, because it's easy to get married, much more difficult to get divorced. I have to know that we're compatible, that we share the same visions, that our goals and things are the same, because to write the check is the easy part. We can support you, but we've got to know that we're not going in different directions. And again, that's been very, very successful for us. So chemistry with your partners, chemistry with your suppliers, kind of thing. Look, in every business you have to do the best deal you can. But if we're going to talk to professionals, architects, and really squeeze their fees down to nothing, okay? They'll do the work because maybe they need it, but they're not going to make anything out of it, and they're going to resent us for it. So we have to negotiate hard, but leave them with sufficient to make it worth their while, and still a good deal for us. And that's been the basis of our relationship since we've started. We still use the same professionals, most of them. We do give new guys a chance, because we need to encourage new blood and new guys. But I think that loyalty to our suppliers, the loyalty we have to our staff, all of these things contribute to what ultimately ended up in our slogan, which says, we're not landlords, we're people. And I think that sums up what we try to do, what my ethos of leadership is all about, is dignity, respect. And of course, we have our company values, which we instill in people, very important to us, that people buy in, and they're part of what I call the Redefine family. South Africa today really faces a myriad of challenges. And taking aside politics, okay, if you look at some of the issues that face this country, it doesn't matter who's in government. The challenges are monumental. Education, for example. If you have a look at what has to be spent on education over the next 15, 20 years, no government can do it on its own. So I have a view that business doesn't do enough. It's very difficult for business to do in this current kind of climate, and it's not a level playing field. If we want to put 100 million rand into education and my opposition only put 20, I'm going to get punished in terms of my share price. I think that ultimately business is facing increased taxes because somehow or other the government's going to have to raise more money, and whether that's VAT or direct taxation, we're already on the cusp of maximum tax. And I've been advocating a levy, across the board levy, for example, for education. Every company based on turnover or whatever pays a levy. But this levy is administered by private enterprise, not by government. We don't want to see more money, more tax going into a bottomless pit. So I say a levy like this is not a tax, it's an investment in our future, and it's essential. But it'll only work if government, who regards business as its enemy, changes its attitude. Business comes to the fore, and importantly, labour. So if we can get that right, I think we can make a huge difference. And it doesn't have to be across the board. You can do education, or you can do housing, all these kind of things. Nothing is new. If you go back into the late 60s or early 70s, we had a Minister of Community Development called Bla Kutsia. We had rent control, so nobody was building flats. Mr. Kutsia came out and said, fine, nobody wants to build flats for rent. For every so many square meters of commercial space, you have to build X amount of flats. That's how Hillbrow and Berea, for example, came about in terms of those high-rise flats. We have things called community forums that we contribute to, CRDs. So if all the people agree, or the majority agree, say in Rosebank, everybody pays a levy on your rates account. That money is given back to a committee who then administers it. Now, it works. So why can't it work on a bigger scale? And this is where I think South Africa needs to go. We have to create employment. We have to improve education.
Fantastic.